Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Planetary Health Summit 2024 and the 6th annual meeting here at Sunway University, located in the very beautiful and dynamic Sunway City. Allow us to just do a quick introduction.
I'm Jessica Kronstadt from the Planetary Health Alliance.
And I'm Paul Andrews from Sunway University, and we will be your MCs for the duration of the summit. I'm mindful of the time, so let's begin with the first session we have this morning. May I ask that the hall doors be closed so that we can focus on the presentation, please? Thank you. Now, before our introduction to the spotlight session this morning, allow me also to talk about the highlights that we have for the morning and the day. We'd like to invite you to stay after the last session this afternoon for the launch of the Planetary Health Playbook happening right here in this venue. And after lunch, the exciting breakout sessions covering a diverse range of topics which include bringing data to life and life to data. We also have Indigenous and local perspectives, turning planetary health and Earth system science into beneficial action, a lightning talk by researchers in the What's New in Research segment, and many other interesting sessions as well. We would also encourage you to join or participate and visit the art exhibition at the School of Arts. So Jennifer, you want to share that? You did? All right, very good. Right, ladies and gentlemen, we begin this morning's session with Dr. Nicole Redvers. Dr. Redvers is an Associate Professor, Western Research Chair, and Director of Indigenous Planetary Health at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry at Western University. Dr. Redvers is a member of the Denínu Ků First Nation and has worked with Indigenous patients, scholars, and communities around the globe for her entire career. She has been actively involved at regional, national, and international levels, promoting the inclusion of Indigenous perspectives in both human and planetary health research and practice. Dr. Redvers is also the author of the trade paperback titled The Science of the Sacred, Bridging Global Indigenous Medicine Systems and Modern Scientific Principles. Dr. Redvers will share a tale of two journeys, living through the climate crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Redvers.
Asi Cho, thank you for that warm welcome. It's just an absolute pleasure to be here on these beautiful, beautiful lands. It's a little warm for my Arctic body, but I'm surviving. It's really important, I think, as Indigenous peoples to not only acknowledge the lands that we come as visitors to, but also to acknowledge the lands that we come from. I'm a member of the Denínu Ků First Nation, which is Dene peoples in subarctic Canada, land of the midnight sun, beautiful northern lights, and a land where the knowledge comes from the land. So what I hope to do today is to be able to maybe set the stage to remind us a little bit about why we're here and why we do the work that we do. But I recall an elder by the name of Joe Copperjack. He's First Nations elder from the Yukon Territory up in northern Canada. And he was on a panel once, chairs like this present, and there was one chair that was empty at the end. And at some point he stood up and he ran off the stage, and we were kind of wondering where he went. And then he came back and he brought this huge picture of the Earth. And he put the picture of the Earth on one of the panel chairs, just to ensure that Mother Earth had a presence and a voice in the conversation. Because even though we're talking about Earth and the planet, sometimes we forget to give voice to those that are with four legs, with wings, with fins, but also the plants and all the other organisms that live on Earth. So I'm going to bring in some narratives this morning to give some space for trees in particular. The way that we've been sharing traditional scientific information is not working. There's been a divide, increase, particularly amplification of misinformation, because we haven't spoken to people's hearts. We've attempted to speak to people's brains, but we've forgotten how to speak to people's hearts. We need to embrace creativity, speaking to the human soul in a time of great global transition. Using what Mi'kmaq elder from the eastern part of Canada states as a two-eyed seeing approach, looking with one eye from the perspectives, knowledge, ways of being of Indigenous perspectives, looking through the other eye with Western ways of knowing and perspectives, and looking through those both eyes together at the solutions needed to move forward in this world. We need person and community-centered approaches, strength-based approaches, as opposed to the continued problematization and deficit-based approaches that have pervaded many of the health issues, including the climate change crisis. If we forget what we're fighting for, the solutions that come from that are going to be fear and anxiety-based, as opposed to based on love and care for the planet. We need an intergenerational and interspecies equity approach, broadening our perspective of equity and what it actually means for human societies. Not being afraid to ask disruptive research questions in a good way. Humbling ourselves to the power of Earth's systems, remembering that we were just one very small part of a larger system. Going from the current square and linear worldviews to circular and holistic worldviews that have embodied within our Indigenous communities for millennia. And remembering that we cannot solve complex problems from the same worldview that created them in the first place, as it will continue to perpetuate a disconnect between ourselves and the planet as relatives. Uplifting and not being afraid to love each other, because the land is as beautiful as your soul is deep. Because of your soul, the land is so beautiful. These pictures are from the lands where I come from, in the subarctic region of Canada, called Denínu or Land of the People. Thinking about the beauty inherent within the places that I come from, we often speak as Indigenous peoples as the fundamental interconnectedness of our lives, of who we are. And this interconnectedness is deeply embodied, that we don't go out in nature, we don't go out in a park, but we are in and of itself nature, not separate from it. And one of the examples that I always give, and from what I've heard, the water into the city here comes from the Klang Valley. So it takes about 3 months on average for cellular turnover to happen within our human bodies, maybe a little faster for the gastric tract, a little slower for the bones, but on average, let's say about 3 months for cellular turnover. Human bodies made up about 60–70% water, depending on if you're assigned male at birth or assigned female at birth. So if you've been living in this beautiful place for about 3 months, you are the water of the rivers and lakes from this beautiful land. You are in and of itself rivers and lakes from the lands that you come from. And in fact, when I always look at the room, I always imagine the beautiful rivers and lakes that make up who you are. You're not human bodies here. The majority of you are Earth. So if the rivers and lakes are healthy, you are healthy. The rivers and lakes are not healthy, you cannot be healthy. So this interconnectedness that we speak of is not only metaphorical or symbolic, there's a physiological basis to it at its most fundamental core. I get concerned sometimes with the climate change movements because there's a lot of fear and anxiety, as I noted before. And I get concerned that the solutions, as noted, are going to be created from that mindset. Because when I go back and talk to my elders back home, all I hear about is love for the planet, care for the planet, stewardship for the planet. And I wonder, what is the difference when you create solutions from that place of love, comparatively from the place of fear and anxiety? Now, unfortunately, the planet and its health is changing. And in fact, these are also pictures from my home region last summer in 2023. We had 238 wildfires spread over a geographic area the size of Portugal, Spain, and France. 68% of the population was evacuated for about 5 weeks with little supports in place, including our most vulnerable populations, Indigenous peoples, as well as those living on the streets, picked up within a matter of 24 to 48 hours and shipped 1,000, sometimes 1,500 kilometers away to the nearest evacuation sites. You can see on the left-hand side the orange sun, the epitome of smoke, which has become a reality in the summers in the Canadian North. The bottom left picture used to be our cultural institute, housing decades of traditional knowledges within our region that burnt down. The top right picture, the little orange dot, is my father's house. You can see behind it the miles and miles of smoke within a kilometer of town. This is the reality from those beautiful pictures that we've seen. So when I look at these pictures, I don't see fear and anxiety. I feel grief, and I feel a sense of loss for the places that we've known and come from. And the elder that was standing on that previous page, Dene Elder Francois Paulette, he states very clearly when he stands up within audiences that your way of life is killing my way of life. So what would the trees say? I have seen so much, yet I have seen so little. Let me see more. Keep me here, please. The juniper tree breathes for you, the pine breathes for you, the tamarack breathes for you, the birch breathes for you, the oak breathes for you, the cedar breathes for you, and I've learned as of yesterday, the eugenia tree breathes for you. Will you breathe for the trees? Now, the definition of health has been platformed for a long time through the World Health Organization, state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. Now, way back, prior to any of the modern-day planetary health movements, back in 1980, there was an environmental group, Friends of the Earth, that proposed an expansion of the definition of the World Health Organization framing of health. That instead of health just being a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, it included ecological well-being, and not merely the absence of disease. That personal health involves planetary health. I was thinking about this definition because if we platform at our foremost institutions what we actually see as health to be devoid of the context of the health of the earth, it perpetuates the continuation of solutions framed within that ideology. So I thought, well, if I was going to change the WHO definition, this is what I would change it to. Health is a state of dynamic balance within and between physical, mental, social, and spiritual well-being that is dependent on planetary health and not merely the absence of disease. Our reframing is fundamentally important at its core. And I'm a big proponent of rethinking and re-questioning some of our basic definitions when it comes to the health and well-being of our communities. Because if we continue to devoid the context, again, the solutions will continue to devoid the context. Even the SDGs have been portrayed often within a linear fashion. But one of the things that's absolutely clear is that the Sustainable Development Goals 6, 13, 14, and 15, all of the other SDGs are reliant on those 4. If we do not have those 4 in place, nothing else matters. Yet we've often looked at them in a linear fashion as if they're siloed, separated, not interconnected, or no inherent dependencies or relationality between them. Rethinking our approaches in terms of the fundamental SDGs, the platform, the rest of them, is important in my mind. What do the trees say? You say we have to walk this way, yet our feet refuse to go. Your path leads to destruction. Your path leads to suffering. Listen to the old ones, whose leaves tremble in the wind. Listen to the old ones, whose roots hold up the earth. Listen to the old ones who are ready to feel your embrace. The United Nations declared the decade 2024 to 2023 as the International Year of Basic Sciences for Sustainable Development. As I noted before, it's important to start asking more disruptive research questions. And one of the fundamental things that we haven't grappled as institutions, as conglomerate, whether or not it's in academic spaces, research, or policy, is thinking, well, if we have fundamental global crises, how can we actually align our disciplines along these fundamental crises for the betterment of humans? In the Western way, we often do things out of our own passions, our own independent inquiries. From an Indigenous standpoint, we do things out of a rooted responsibility, a connection to our communities, and accountability to our lands. How do we rethink sciences within this decade, regardless of the fields and the disciplines that we're from, to start thinking about those alignment with the greatest needs that we have on the planet today? We know that papers are becoming less disruptive. Science is becoming less disruptive. And in my mind, it's because we continue to think through the same lens of the world, linear and square worldviews as opposed to holistic, circular worldviews. Systems-based approaches, recognizing that variables are not important alone, but they depend completely and utterly on the relationships between them. How do we go from knowledge transmission to relational care? One way of knowing to ecologies of knowledge, hierarchical practices to communities of practice, disconnection to reconnection, fear to wonder and awe, universities to pluriversities, anthropocentric or human-centric to ecocentric, despair to hope, domination to participation, hegemony to inclusivity, me to we. How do we be able to think about, regardless of the disciplines that we come from, the multi-scalar influences, being able to zoom in and zoom out in any given time? And in fact, in our Indigenous ceremonies, every single ceremony embodies the components of the micro experience as peoples, to the contextual, to the relational, and to the universal at any given moment within time. And in fact, we have many of our traditional medicines that when we give a prescription, if we could call it that, there's the consideration of the micro to the meta level in every single prescription or clinical advice given, because we never forget the context. Western science has attempted to remove the context, focus in on the variables alone, but by removing the context, we have forgotten the place that we're in as human beings. From Mother Earth, her veins are being bled dry, the veins intact, poisoned. Mother Earth needs our help, but we need her help more. Help her, help us. When we're held within our mother's wombs, our umbilical cord serves as the basis of our needs. But as soon as we're birthed earthside, the umbilical cord transfers to Mother Earth as our sole provider of water and foods in the lands that we come from. This dependency is utterly fundamental. The trees speak. They just walk by me. Have they forgotten who I am? I am here, I see, I feel. The old ones are with me, watching over you, ready to help, ready to heal, when you are ready. I asked an elder once, a few years back from my home region, and I asked her, why do you think that Earth is suffering? And she said, well, we don't sing to the trees anymore. We don't sing to the plants, we don't sing to the animals. And I thought about her words And what I realized was that it was the attention to earth. Most of us wake up, get ready for the day. Some people jump in their cars, they go to work, they stay in a building all day. Maybe they get in a car, go back home. Not ever looking up, not ever giving the attention to the trees or the plants around. We fight for nature, but do we connect to her? So it's a call within spaces to remember why we're here. I encourage all of you in the next weeks to come to take a moment and touch a tree. It seems like such a simple act, but in our communities, if we're not actually touching and engaging our sensual feelings with other beings outside of ourselves, we forget our place within a greater universe. Touching the tree, touching the earth, grounding ourselves and remember our place. We were asked a few months ago, end of last year, 2023, for the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, which is actually happening right now in New York, to think about describing Indigenous determinants of health, specifically in the context of Indigenous traditional knowledges, because we've seen a fundamental increase in the interest in Indigenous traditional knowledges around the world. One of the problematic components, although that's very positive, is that the knowledge is often being prioritized over the peoples. And it's Indigenous peoples that carry that knowledge. So we came up with a number of recommendations that we feel is incredibly important as we move within this interest area of Indigenous traditional knowledges as it pertains to planetary health, climate change, One Health. And one of the fundamental important points is that particularly within Asia, there's very few countries that actually formally recognize its Indigenous peoples as a peoples under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In fact, there's still many governments around the world that don't recognize Indigenous peoples as peoples. So before you can recognize the knowledge, you have to recognize the people that hold those knowledges. So we call for national governments to equitably and explicitly recognize Indigenous peoples and their knowledges. Institutions and organizations to adopt recognition for the equitable, scientific, and technical validity of Indigenous knowledge and systems. We have had a Western hegemony, an assumed superiority of knowledges. Knowledge democracy has not prevailed, with Indigenous knowledges being assumed myth, legend, facing erasure, which is a predominance and a continuation of the colonial approaches that we've had within our nations. National governments, institutions, and organizations to establish paid Indigenous-led governance boards to guide the implementation of Indigenous knowledges. National governments, institutions, and organizations to establish transparent procedures for substantial engagement of Indigenous peoples in pertinent issues. Institutions and organizations to create structures that ensure the respect for and ability to incorporate Indigenous research methodologies and practices. Lastly, national governments, institutions, and organizations to formally adopt cultural safety, not cultural competency. Cultural safety is an approach across all departments and units. I used to think the way to change the world was to speak loudly, far and wide with fierceness. I know now the way to change the world is to speak quietly from deep within with love. As an Indigenous woman, I'm forced to walk in two journeys and have to reconcile that on a daily basis. Western society is taught to shy away from concepts of love in professional settings. However, it's an integral backbone to Indigenous systems. The sickness that has come was no accident. The sickness that has come was called to be. We forgot how to live together. We forgot how to work together. We forgot how to stand together. We forgot about our relatives. We neglected Mother Earth. The sickness comes to us for one last chance to remember who we are, to remember our relatives, to remember and honor Mother Earth, together as one peoples. So with this, I want to say Masi Cho. Cho is like an honor that we situate to rivers. Dei Cho is a river within my region. It's honor river. Tu Cho is an honor lake. Masi Cho is an honor thank you. So Masi Cho for your time and attention today, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you for a short time. Masi.